Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast about everyday leadership for everyday legends. I'm Ashley Baltecki, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. On the podcast, we share how every tradie can practice leadership in their role, regardless of their title or experience. In each episode, you'll hear from tradies across all industries about how they apply leadership skills and mindsets in the trades, so we can learn from them and level up our leadership skills on site. In this episode, we cover how personal vulnerability and a deep understanding of your team can transform how you manage team dynamics and how healthy routines can strengthen your resilience on site. We're joined by someone who embodies what modern leadership in the trades can look like when you combine discipline, self-awareness, and a genuine commitment to lifting others up. Claude Thomsen is a former Army serviceman who now works full-time as a roofer and leading hand at Weber Roofing. But Claude's impact stretches far beyond the teams he leads on site. Through his online presence as that sober tradie, he's become a powerful voice for healthier trade culture, personal well-being, and the kind of leadership that starts from the inside out. In this conversation, we dig into how taking ownership of your health and mindset can transform how you show up at work, how to inspire others without forcing their hand, and what it really takes to help the people around you reach their potential. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today, Claude.
Thanks for having me, Ash.
Now, the first question I always ask my guests is, what does leadership mean to you, both in the workplace and outside of working on the tools?
So leadership to me means leading by example. And I firmly believe that I wouldn't ask of others what I'm not willing to do for myself. And I think that it's one thing to be the hardest worker on the job site. You race around, you do everything. But it's also another thing to know the crew, know the boys, know the women that are working for you, and being able to bring the best out of the group in order to work towards that desired outcome.
There's so much you said in there that I could tease out more questions. But before I get into that, you're a leading hand with Weber Roofing, but where did that leadership journey begin?
So my leadership journey began in 2012 when I was 17 and a half. I enlisted into the Army Reserve. And looking back on it, I was very fortunate to be in that environment where often it came down the success of the job or the mission. Often it came down to two big points, and that was teamwork and good leadership. At a very young age, I was 17 and a half, I was still very young. I was very fortunate to be molded by those sorts of qualities. And to be sitting here at 30, I think those traits have translated over to the workforce.
Yeah, I can imagine as someone who hasn't been or known many people who've been in that military field, there's definitely just a generic brand of discipline and leadership, and obviously teamwork and relationships being really powerful in that environment. They're universal skills to success in any team that's trying to achieve a goal. When it comes to leadership, what ideas did you have about leadership before you went on that journey, or even more recently, ideas that you've had that you've now outgrown or that have changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when I stepped into sort of those leadership roles, 17, 18, 19, I got a lot of things wrong. And one of those things that I got wrong was I thought that leadership was gifts. I thought that if I gifted someone like a early day, or I gifted someone some drinks at the bars, my mates, like, here's a gift. I thought that respect would come back to me as I would be giving gifts. When in fact, I learned later in my journey in leadership that often respect comes when you have those hard conversations, when you draw that line in the sand, and often you've got to say no. From the early mistakes of gifting people things, I learned that respect and good leadership is often saying no and drawing the line in the sand.
I find that really interesting because I do think, especially for anyone that moves into leadership for the first time, and I definitely know when I started to take on that role of mentor for apprentices or to backfill leadership roles when my leading hands or supervisors were away, that it's a weird balance when you're in that position for the first time of you want to be liked, and that's very different to being respected and effective. And it sounds like that gifting was very much that learning journey for you.
Completely.
Now, how do you actually go about creating that respect with your team and maintaining that? You've worked on setting boundaries, obviously having those difficult conversations that people might not like, but they at least obviously understand and respect. But is there other tools or practices you have that build those strong relationships with your team so you can have those hard conversations?
Yeah, for sure. I often like to have a level of understanding and somewhat empathy towards the boys because we're all human at the end of the day. And I think the more you know the people you work with, the more that you can draw out, you can tap into what drives this person. How can I get the best out of this person over these 8 hours in order to have a successful day, have a good day on the tools? So definitely a level of understanding towards the people that you're working with, and just forming a a healthy relationship with these people.
It's something that comes up a lot on this podcast, which is the fact that people are so diverse. And while we like to think that leadership can be black and white and one approach suits everyone, that's very rarely the case. So when it comes to bringing the best out of each person and knowing that requires understanding and that's not the same for each person, it obviously takes a lot of mental energy and emotional energy as the leader, where we've all come off the tools and we're like, yep, okay, I feel satisfied once I've got the job done and I've got this many jobs done in a day, and that's my sense of achievement. So from managing yourself and your own energy and well-being, how do you manage that when it is such an energy drain to give so much energy to other people, which is ultimately the role of leadership?
This is just me personally, but a great top up in energy that I love to do, and it's part of my routine now, is I love to go for a run in the morning. That gets my battery fully charged, and that puts me in a positive mindset. It puts me in a better mood. And when I do finally get to site and I lace up, I get to give that energy to people and I get to lift team spirits that way. Yeah, definitely physical activity in the morning helps me get the best out of myself to give to the others.
And I like that while it seems like it would probably be an energy drain, that because it's something that you do enjoy, that often energy creates more energy. That's something I've learned over the years. But in terms of leading by example, which you mentioned earlier as a key way you see yourself practicing leadership, what behaviors do you model or encourage to create healthier and safer trade teams and trade dynamics and culture in your crew?
Yeah, so first off the bat, I would definitely say a positive attitude. I think bringing a positive attitude first thing in the morning, being able to trickle that positive attitude towards the job at hand and give that to the people, it's so infectious. And conversely speaking, it's very easy to buy into a negative attitude or a negative mindset where we're not getting the best out of our people. The job's taking forever because we've just got a bit of a breakdown in attitudes, motivations. So definitely number one behavior would have to be positive attitude. And I would also say a behavior would be just having a level of eagerness to learn and improve. I think having that sort of behavior that you can showcase, but especially to the younger guys on site, that shows them that we're here, we're ready to learn, and it shouldn't be a chore. This is a trade, this is a skill that we're learning that is going to benefit us. Fighting for that eagerness to ask questions and improve is that's a massive thing. So definitely, yeah, positive attitude and a degree of eagerness to learn and improve.
That's a really great example. And I love it because as tradespeople, we are constantly practicing and improving in our trade. But the same is true of our people skills. And when we practice leadership, whether we're the apprentice or the supervisor, like it's an ongoing journey and we're not perfect and we're all learning and growing. And we have to have that tolerance for each other. Now, we actually connected before this podcast through Instagram, where you have the handle That Sober Tradie. What inspired that platform and showing up as a leader online in that kind of role model capacity for a healthier trade sector through sobriety?
I love this question. So that tradie kicked off as just as any Instagram page kicks off. It's I'm doing this, I'm going to document what I'm doing and like I'm going to document how I'm feeling and what I find out. So it was a massive thing for me to stop drinking. And I thought, what better way to keep myself accountable and also hopefully influence people to make a better choice around drinking and stuff like that. That Sober Tradie was born over 2 years ago now. I started that page and pretty much started posting everything that I was thinking, everything that I was feeling, stuff that happened to me before, after, during, everything. And super grateful for the page because like we were able to connect, which is great. And lots of other people, which has been absolutely a blessing to me.
I really love the conversation because I know I went through a stage in my own trade journey where I was at the mines. I was really struggling with my mental health, and a big part of my recovery was deciding to remove drinking because it can have a depressant factor, and it exaggerated what I was already struggling with. Yet the mines and a lot of trade cultures have this like synergy with drinking, and I remember so many instances where I'd have to explain myself or justify why I wasn't drinking because it just wasn't the norm and it didn't fit the mold of what it meant to be a tradie. And as a woman in trade, it was like I already stick out, and it was just another way that I didn't quite fit into the social norm. What has sobriety done for you in terms of how you show up at work and how you relate with people in your life, in the workplace and outside of work?
I would say the best thing that has come of getting off the booze and being on the tools is my capacity for workload. I am absolutely astounded at how much more I can get done both at work and in my personal life. And to be honest, it's been the absolute best thing that has ever happened to me. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, the capacity to work. And although I'm a worker bee, and if, there are business owners out there, I would argue and say drinking less would increase your capacity. Yeah, I like to run a couple of hours before work. Imagine what you could do a couple of hours before work, compound that over a year for your business. I think the numbers would crunch themselves and you would be very surprised at what you could do for your business.
I can hear that there's like strength in the routine of showing up for yourself or showing up for something consistently every day. And also that while it seems like a small choice or a small action for one day, the fact of it compounding over a long time, it's actually increasing your resilience, which is interesting because I feel like a common reason for drinking for a lot of people is, oh, this is to help me unwind, this is to help me relax so that I do have more resilience and I'm not like holding on to all the stress. But the fact that in not drinking and getting off the booze you actually have more resilience is almost
Mm.
counterintuitive to that common thinking.
Definitely counterintuitive, and I think I speak to a few builders on site most weeks, and it is the common song that you've just sung, and it's I'm stressed, I've got deadlines, I've got payroll, I've got this, I've got that with the business, and yes, it can be consuming, but I like to argue that have you tried sitting through this feeling? Have you tried? And it's a very uncomfortable feeling because it's I'm trying to get away from this feeling. I need a drink, and I get it. I really do. But I definitely love to argue the point. Have you tried sitting through it? Have you tried other alternatives? Eating a bit better, focusing on a little bit of training and stuff like that. But we're never going to change anyone. It's definitely a personal choice. But yeah, I think drinking is will stab you in the back before it gets anything good going for you.
When it comes to the trades, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest health challenge right now? Is it physical, is it cultural, or is it safety wise?
I would definitely say it's just an attitude problem. I can identify a few patterns now with social media where a lot of people believe that there is another way around hard work. There is another way around avoiding whether it's the uni pathway or the trade pathway. But I am firm on the belief that you will learn everything that you need in the future by going through these tier one, these low level jobs that you think are low level jobs, whatever you think it is. I believe that you pick up what you need to know for later on in life by going through these tough times in your life. And the tough times for a lot of these people are the job that we're working.
It's interesting you share that because I know that when I've reflected on grit and resilience and coming through my own challenges in life, as we all have to overcome, there's a saying where that if you do the easy thing first, it gets harder later.
Mm,
Whereas if you do the hard thing first, it tends to make life easier later. Obviously, that comes with time and perspective and good role models as well. So when it comes to how you show up online and how you show up as a leader and a mate on site, how do you influence the people around you without overstepping and trying to, obviously, because influence isn't about saying I know better and you're wrong and you should run and you should stop drinking, because people are only going to do what they're willing to do. But how do you, I guess, intentionally show up as that role model and promote and share what you've learned to help other people?
Yeah, definitely. I love to just be there for people, and I'm a massive believer and I'm a massive fan of lived experience. I tell some of these guys at work, listen, like, you got to go through this. Like, I'll be here for you. You call me, you text me anytime, I'll always be here for you. But I don't think there's a way around this. So I'll always be there for these guys. But I would always say nothing ever beats lived experience and life experience.
Did you find it hard to build your capacity for vulnerability to share the hard parts of your life with other people?
Definitely. I think it's only human nature where we have a narrative or we have a little bit of darkness in us that we nourish that darkness where it becomes a narrative that we believe. And then it becomes, oh, I don't think I can talk about this. I'm going to get crucified if I say this or if I behave like this. Or so it is very hard to be vulnerable with people because we know people judge. That's just everyone does it. So it's very hard to step out into the light and to tell your story and be vulnerable with people. But I believe that if you're going to make any sort of sustainable change in any parts of your life, we have to step out of the dark. We have to bring forth whatever it is that's happened and present that to the light.
I find that really powerful because I often reflect on probably my whole apprenticeship, where over time I did become more comfortable in the trade as myself, but in many ways I would self-censor who I was because I didn't fit the mold, not only because of my gender. That wasn't so much a factor as the fact that I was a big reader or I didn't have a project car like all the other people in the workshop. And it takes, again, that time and experience, because people don't really open that door and show you that actually, you know what, I don't have a project car either. Like, you don't have to have a project car to be a mechanic. Or I also like to read books, or I don't follow the footy, I'm actually really interested in karate. Like, we are also unique, but when no one kind of leads by example and creates that space to bring our whole selves to work, we all fit in the mold and unintentionally censor ourselves and create that is like the expectation, where just by being that person who says, hey, yeah, this is how I'm different, or this is something that I've struggled with, or this is a time I made a mistake. When we take up that space, we actually make more space for others as well.
So well said. Completely agree.
What's next for that sober tradie?
I'm hosting a community event called Built to Last, which is focused on health within the trades. So I'm very excited, also very nervous because is anyone going to show up? No, if it's something that I'm passionate about, it could just be me in the mist going for a run, and I would be happy with that because it's just what I believe in.
I often say I'm the right kind of crazy, because it's a similar journey starting a podcast, or when you started social media. I imagine you had the same journey where it was, is anyone listening? But you just keep showing up because you're driven by clearly something more than yourself. And that's a desire to have a positive impact on the trades and the people within it, whether they're your mates or whether they're strangers. The final question I ask all our guests is, what is your advice to other tradies about how they can practice leadership in the trades, no matter where they're at in their careers at the moment?
It would have to come back to the first question, and it would be, don't ask of other people what you're not willing to do. So I think it speaks for itself. And yes, I would definitely say lead by example.
I love that. That's a really concise conclusion for everything you've shared. It's very clear that leadership is so much about how do you be the best version of yourself, and then how do you create the space and how do you support other people so that they can be the best version of themselves holistically, whether that's in their trade, in their attitude, or in their well-being. So thank you for everything you've shared on the podcast, Claude. I'm really excited for what comes next with that Sober Tradie, and also for the impact I'm sure you're making on the teams that you lead on site at the moment.
Thank you so much for having me, Ash. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back in a fortnight with another tradie sharing how they bring leadership to life on the tools. If this episode hits the mark for you, tap like, subscribe to Tradies Who Lead, or follow us on socials to hear more stories from the people shaping our industry.